Please welcome our three American heroes. Here they are. A man who has spent 28 days in space on 4 shuttle missions, twice as pilot and twice as commander, and who led our nation's space and aeronautics efforts as the 12th administrator of NASA, retired U.S. Marine Corps Major General Charles Bolden. A medical doctor who spent 153 days in space on the shuttle and the Russian Mir space station, making over 2,300 orbits of the planet Earth, retired U.S. Navy Captain Jerry Linenger. And a veteran of 2 shuttle missions which he piloted, a man who spent over 31 days in space, making nearly 500 orbits of our planet, retired U.S. Air Force Colonel Gregory Johnson. And you will have a chance to ask questions, so get those questions in your mind. And we're going to start by asking each of our great American hero astronauts to answer this question: what was the most exciting thing that happened to you in space?
I don't think there was a single most exciting thing. One of the most fun, exciting things was on my 3rd mission, which was called NASA's Mission to Planet Earth, STS-45. We had 13 different experiments on board. 10 of them, everything was in the payload bay, the cargo bay. And one of the experiments was a Japanese experiment called CPAC. And I have no idea what the acronym stands for. But it was believe it or not, it was a particle accelerator. And the theory was we could fire these ionized particles back at Earth's atmosphere, and when they contacted the atmosphere, they would charge it, and we could produce artificial aurora. I did not believe that. And so I was down in the middeck on the day that we first did it. We had a rule that you don't say anything like holy, any of those things that you can imagine what you're saying if everybody wasn't up on the flight deck, because it could mean the vehicle's coming apart. It could mean all kinds of bad things. And all of a sudden I heard this roar from the flight deck, holy! And I floated up real quickly. I said, what's going on? And they said, you won't believe this. And so they turned the machine on again, and it fired this beam from the payload bay of the shuttle. The shuttle kind of glowed, and all of a sudden we looked on the camera, and down on Earth, at the top of the atmosphere, when the particles hit, you saw this artificial aurora created. And so that was my most unbelievable, exciting experience for me, which was a good one.
Jerry Linenger.
I always say, and I urge you all, have fun. Have fun. So I'm in space after, 5 months on a Russian space station, and Jean-Francois Clairvoy shows up, French guy with really good taste. He says, Jerry, I must give you a haircut to look good for Catherine when you get back. And then he said, may I do an experiment on you? And I said, sure. And at that point, I am adapted to space. I felt like I lived there all my life. I did not see floor, walls, and ceiling. I was 3-dimensional, and I could be up on the ceiling upside down talking, and I'd be as comfortable as sitting down here. So he took me, got in some Foot Loops, and started spinning me, and he counted 25 somersaults, 50 somersaults. He's writing data down, 100 somersaults. He did about 250 somersaults on me. He stopped me. He goes, no matter what I do to you, Jerry, you're going to be fine. And that's exactly right. So I guess the big surprise was the adaptability of a human being, how we can adapt to anything. If I can adapt to that, you can adapt to anything. A lot of seniors here heading off to college. You can adapt to it. Heading off to high school, maybe. You can adapt to it. That's a big lesson I learned up there.
Greg Johnson.
So I'd like to say I'm humbled to be in the presence of these very senior astronauts. They had flown 7 times in space when I first arrived at the astronaut corps, and so they were our heroes as we were. Anyway, I'd say probably the most exciting moment of our flight, of my flights, was the last flight of Endeavour. We were taking up the alpha magnetic spectrometer, and that was a project that was so important that the NASA administrator added a shuttle flight to the manifest so that we could fly STS. And so I think we're having a little trouble with this microphone. But this was a $1.5 billion experiment, and it was pure fundamental research, looking into the heavens to better understand naturally occurring antimatter, dark energy, which the dark energy and dark matter make up about 95% of our universe. So it's a big unknown. And this particle detector is unique because it's outside our atmosphere, and so these high energy particles that can't penetrate our atmosphere could be collected by the AMS. And so now the AMS is up there. It's collected about over 100 billion cosmic particles. But the moment we installed that thing, Charlie and Jerry, that was, it was a team effort. We were all really excited. I was actually running the robotic arm, so I didn't want to crash the thing into the side of the truss. We were real careful. But when Mike Fink turned the switch on and the thing worked, we were jubilant.
Now, let me transition to that to ask, were there any really weird, crazy, unexpected things that happened to you? Did anybody see any aliens?
No. We get asked that I think we get asked it all the time. To my knowledge, there's been one astronaut, I think, who says that he saw something, an Apollo astronaut. But other than that, we've all seen what are called UFOs, unidentified flying object. Because a UFO in a spacecraft is anything that you don't recognize. And so frequently you'd see it coming out the back around the tail of the shuttle, and it would only take a few minutes, as we learned about this, for the photo analysis to be done, and they say, oh, that's ice. Because back where the main engines come out of the vehicle, you would think, how can ice be back there? But that's also where very super cool liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen go into the vehicle to use as propellant for the engines. And think about sitting on a launch pad at the Kennedy Space Center, where it is incredibly humid, and so you've got these super cool temperatures and all this moisture in the air, and you end up with a sheet of ice that's about several inches thick that just accumulates over the hours that you're laying on the launch pad. And it takes a while for all that stuff to kind of sublimate. It doesn't melt. It goes directly from solid to gaseous form, and after a while, the ice starts to break off. So that's the most common thing, the most common UFO you see.
Now, Jerry, you had a few interesting experiences. So you were on the Russian Mir space station, and you got there by the shuttle, right?
Yes.
So what happened on the Mir?
So I'm on a Russian space station. We wanted to find out how the Russians operated, so I was essentially a cosmonaut. So я говорит по-русски все время. If you're taking language class, study it hard. You had to talk Russian. 2 Russian crewmates essentially spoke no English, broken down communication to Earth. So we were isolated, cut off, 3 of us, 5 months in space. Had lots of close calls up there. It was an old space station. We learned a lot. Life support systems, you got to keep them going. Oxygen generator breaking down. If Greg's working on it and he can't fix it, we're going to suffocate 2 or 3 days down the line. And so everything is very critical. It is a pressure environment. If you're having a hard time having an exam and you're getting nervous, just put it in perspective a little bit. It's not life and death. Probably the thing everyone talks about, we had a fire on board, unexpected, 2 or 3 foot flames, blowtorch-like in intensity. And the one thing that probably surprised me more than anything in space was the spread of the smoke. And within, I've done Navy firefighting. They sit, mock-up hull of a ship with big flames around you. But within about 30 seconds, I could not see the 5 fingers in front of my face, and smoke was everywhere. So it's total blackout, saved by your respirator, keep you alive, fire extinguishers to try to get the fire out, and about 14 minutes of fighting a fire. Big sigh of relief when the flame finally goes out. And then back to all your life training. As a physician, I say, okay, great, we survived the fire, but we still have an unbreathable atmosphere. And if we can't get the life support systems to clear out the smoke, we're all going to suffocate. And so you breathe very slowly. It's kind of like scuba diving where you don't have a lot of oxygen left and you still got a long ways to the surface, and you try to make every breath count. I pulled out tracheostomy tubes, laryngoscopes, scalpels, hold-down straps, ready to intubate somebody if they go into respiratory failure. But anyway, we survived it. But I guess my lesson on that is things happen unexpectedly, and you better be trained, you better be prepared. And the other thing, all your life skills, and I'm talking about the skills you're learning right now, apply down the line. And in my case, my medical training kicked in, and thank goodness we did not have a respiratory emergency, but I was ready to respond to that. So realize when you're studying, some subject that's, starting to say, man, I've had enough studying tonight, it matters what you're learning. And somewhere down the line, you might have to draw upon that knowledge. So take it seriously.
Greg, you have a lot of knowledge about the space station, so maybe we could tee up a video about the space station, and you could tell us some things that happened to you, and also describe for us what we're looking at on this video.
Okay, so you can maybe drop the lights a little bit. While he's setting it up, I did see a UFO, by the way, Charlie. Looking out the back window of the shuttle, there was a vehicle, a European vehicle that was being tested for the first time, a cargo vehicle. And I looked out the back window, and it appeared, and it looked like a spaceship to me. And I didn't share it with my commander for about 45 minutes, and finally I said, Dom, I saw a spaceship out there. He said, that's the ATV. So then it became an IFO. Okay, so here's the International Space Station. And this is our current human-occupied vehicle in outer space. I'm going to hold this microphone like this. Yeah, thank you. I'm having trouble with this one.
And the International Space Station is probably the greatest, engineering achievement of our civilization to this point. 16 nations working together to build the International Space Station. It's the size of a football field, weighs 1 million pounds. We saw it last night fly overhead the NMC observatory. It's the brightest star in the sky. And people live and work on the International Space Station. We started building it back in the late 90s, one module at a time. And then after a few modules in November of 2000, we started living in the house as we were building it. And at the end, the period of time when I was flying the space shuttle, most of the shuttle flights were dedicated to taking up these pieces and parts up to the International Space Station. So the space station is a laboratory in space where it's the only place we can get pure microgravity, 0G, for long periods of time. So we can study biological and physical processes that we just can't replicate the conditions here on the Earth because we can't turn the gravity switch off here on the Earth. And so the International Space Station, it's a model of international collaboration. It's a unique place where we can study how to live in space and how to expand our footprint in space, but also to solve problems here on the Earth. And I'd like to hand it off to Charlie to talk a little bit more about some of the research that we're doing on the International Space Station.
Well, as Greg talked about, today we collaborate with, there's far more than the 16 nations that actually started participating in station. There's 5 partners. It is not a U.S. Facility, first of all. People kind of misunderstand that. It belongs to 5 different groups. The United States is represented by NASA. Russia has Roscosmos, the Russian space agency. The largest partner is the European Space Agency, which is 16 there are actually 22 member nations. About 16 of them actually pay into the International Space Station. Then we have the Japanese Space Agency and the Canadian Space Agency. And everybody contributes something unique, as Greg has been talking about before. Like the Japanese have the most modern facility on the station today, something called JIM, the Japanese Experiment Module. Everybody loves it because it's got new facilities, it's got its own robotic arm, it's got an airlock, so the astronauts can actually go in JIM, use the arm to put things into the airlock, depressure or pressurize it. They can grab things out of the airlock, work on them. For example, if any of you have ever done a CubeSat, or any of you thinking about doing a CubeSat, we have an elementary school, St. Thomas More, a Catholic elementary school in Arlington, Virginia, that sent a CubeSat that the students had made up to the International Space Station, where it was deployed from JIM using the CubeSat deploy mechanism. And I don't know if we've got the other film that we're going to show, which is about science on the International Space Station, or science it'll be coming up. And you'll just read what it says. It's got great music to dance to if you want to get up in the aisles and dance or something like that. But it represents, as Greg said, it's our settlement away from the planet. We have been living and working. Most of you are 18 years or younger. So for any of you who are 18 years old or younger, you have never taken a breath in your life when human beings haven't been living and working on the International Space Station. We've had conflicts down here on Earth. Russia and the U.S. don't get along, but on the International Space Station, it's a totally different world. And so we've worked together collaboratively there for the last, when you count the beginning of construction, for the last 20 years, but 18 years of constant habitation. And some of you may get an opportunity to go there. It doesn't have very much life left. It's probably 2024, 2028 or so before it goes away.
So you need to hurry up and get your degrees and get into the space program and get up there. Speaking of people who are getting up there, let me mention T.C. West's experiment that was chosen for the International Space Station. So if they're in the audience, please congratulate Hattie Holmes, Langley Nelson, Kel Cerny, and Lainey Wickman. Congratulations. Hundreds of applicants, and they are the winners. Now, if we could tee up the science and space video, we'll look at some of those experiments. Exercise apparatus that has changed the game for human beings living and working in space. This was our first meal that we prepared on the station. It's lettuce, grown on station. They said it wasn't that good. Too sweet. Not good Michigan lettuce. What's important is look at the number of different people in different professions who are working to make it possible for a very small group of astronauts to have the experience of a lifetime. Literally thousands and thousands of people who do everything that we take for granted every day, from cooks, dietitians, attorneys, secretaries, you name it. That's the 18,000 people of NASA plus the about 40,000 contractors that make it possible for the three of us to be sitting up here, and that's why I kind of eschew the term, hero, because they're the real heroes when you get down to it. Yeah. I want to watch my time, so I also want to congratulate Atlas Space Explorers. Are you in the audience? Okay.
Nice shirt.
Hey, nice shirt. Okay. And also, we have a number of robotics teams involved here in Traverse City area. FIRST, VEX, and Manufacturing Academy from many different schools. So are there robotics experimenters in the audience? Yeah. Woo! Okay, here they are. some of these people are going to be flying on something. We're not sure what exactly, but that's the future. Maybe, Charlie, you could say a few words about the future.
I mean, you tell us. We're old, not, it's a relative term. We're old guys in terms of, we're old, that's true.
Yeah.
But you know, you will determine where we go. The people ask us, they ask me anyway all the time, why has it taken us 50 years and we're still not back on the moon? And it's a pretty simple answer. You've got to have money and willpower. You know, we like to talk about it, but I'm not sure we have the willpower to do it. We had an enemy. It was a geopolitical imperative to beat the Soviets to the moon, and once that was done, you know, we gave up. We just said, okay, we've done that, what's next? And we moved on to the next program. What we hopefully will help you understand is the incredible value of being able to live and work in space to make life better here on the planet. I think every one of us has done things in space knowing that what we did, if we were successful, or sometimes if we weren't successful, it was going to make a difference for people back here on the planet. That's why we go to space, to make life better here on the planet. So kind of keep that in mind.
Well, it's an important thing that you have done and are doing, and it's also an incredibly courageous thing. When I think of the risk factor and the difficulty and the training that you had to go through, it's an incredible accomplishment for all of you and for all of your colleagues in the space program. Thank you. I think we'll move to questions from the audience if we can turn up the lights a bit, and we have microphones available. I'm looking. In the meantime, let me also mention two TC West students. Anybody here from TC West? Lex Radke and Ariana Stallworth, who have been selected. Their design has been selected for a patch for the to go up on the ISS, and it underscores something that Charlie was talking about last night, that there is such a diversity of people who are involved in this program, including artists and musicians and all sorts of people who you might not think about. There was a little clip at the end there of chefs preparing meals. What's the food like up there anyway?
Jerry lived on Mir. He'll tell you about the bad food.
I had Russian food, so you better like borscht. And I'll tell you, my bottom line is variety matters. And so you don't realize, after a while, I would have anything as long as it was something different than I ate in the last month. So I'm sucking down dehydrated, jellied fish out of a toothpaste tube, and I'm loving it. And I'm eating borscht, and I'm loving it. And I'll tell you, the other thing I learned what a pregnant woman must feel like. I was craving certain things, and I would have killed for cottage cheese or a big glass of milk. And then when I get back, I find out I had about a 12% bone loss, decalcification of my bones. And so that's probably my, you know, incredible physiology of the human being, knowing I need calcium, and I would have killed again for a glass of milk up there. And so it was pretty fascinating. But food overall on the shuttle, after it came up, you know, dehydrated shrimp cocktail, not bad.
So, Jerry, how is the appetizing appetizer? Did you ever have that?
Nothing was appetizing, but
Yeah.
you do get hungry. People say, you know, I'll tell you, you get tired. At the end of the day, you're absolutely exhausted. I'd go to my wall. I used to sleep upside down, piece of Velcro around me, and I would sleep well because you are mentally taxed. And I think it's something you don't realize. Any simple task I do, if I'm opening a bag of M&Ms, I don't just open it and start eating. I have to say, if I open this thing, I'm going to have M&Ms floating all over. So I need to put it inside a Ziploc bag. Then I need to open it very carefully, maybe a Ziploc bag inside that. Then maybe pop one M&M out. Then go like this and eat it. Now that's a very basic thing that you would just grab a bag of chips and just go like this without thinking. But when you're talking, you know, high-speed cameras and a flame propagation experiment, and I've got to time it exactly right, and get everything right, and I'm floating as I'm doing it, it is a lot of mental energy. Everything you do up there, we're down on Earth, we just do things without even thinking about it.
Or you can relax and enjoy it. Just turn the M&Ms loose and let your crewmates go
true,
chasing them.
Without hands, like a pack band. But so I just wanted to comment on the food, the Russian food, because on the International Space Station we had the expedition crew, which was comprised of Russians, and we also had an Italian up there, and then we had an Italian on our crew. And so we ate a huge meal together on the Russian side, and I was exposed to some of the different Russian foods, and that's where the appetizing appetizer, they pulled it out, it was like in a can. It's like, wow, our food is a lot better on the space shuttle.
It looks a lot like cat food in general.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Jerry talked about the bone loss, and I mentioned, you saw some of the apparatus that we have on the International Space Station today. Crews today, when we came back, it didn't matter whether we were gone for 6 days or 100 and some odd days like Jerry. You came back, two things you could count on. You had muscle mass loss, atrophy, muscle atrophy, because the exercise was limited, and you had bone loss. Today, crews come back from the International Space Station. Many of them are in better shape than they were when they left, and it's because of the exercise apparatus we have on board. The number one thing is something called the ARED. I hate acronyms, but it's some kind of assisted resistance device, and it's like a universal weight machine. So astronauts come back, they're healthy, they're strong. They're still got to readapt, because your inner ear, your balance mechanism doesn't work. So there's no up or down. You don't care. After about a day and a half, the brain is amazing. As Jerry said, the human body is an amazingly adaptive piece of apparatus. And so you can be upside down, you don't know it, you don't care. You learn to read upside down, read sideways, do everything. The human body just adapts, but it does take time when you come back. I think there's a question there.
We got questions in the audience. We've got microphones. Think about it. Lifting weights in weightlessness. There's a odd
So
concept.
obviously in that case, that's a good point though. Actually, they have to design these things with bungee cord type things.
Yeah.
So in my day, it was a bungee cord, and you're doing squats with kind of a windsurfer harness, and that's how you try to maintain your bone mass up there.
Question,
But yeah, lifting weights, I can lift Charlie up with one finger. I used to live with a bunch of Navy SEALs out in Coronado, California, and when I'm out doing a spacewalk, lifting a 500-pound optical sensor package like this, I'm saying, man, I wish my old SEAL team buddies could see me now. Lininger's pretty tough after all. So, it is pretty awesome, some of the things you do up there.
Please stand up and tell us where you're from.
I'm from TC West, and I was wondering what makes food so appetizing? I mean, not appetizing.
I think,
Go.
I'm sorry. A lot of it has to do with your sense of smell. And so you've got body fluid shifting to the head. And a lot of astronauts, by the way, if we're in space right now and you're all new astronauts, it might be this half that doesn't feel very well, first day and a half or so. Feel all that fluid shifts to your brain area, your face gets puffy, grandma says, hey Jerry, you look good, you look like you have a little weight on you. But in fact, a lot of people have kind of headaches from that. You also expand a little bit. So the first day I'm up there, I'm an inch taller. The next day I'm an inch taller. The intervertebral discs basically fill up with fluid, you're not compressing them, and you get taller. Unfortunately, some people get back pain from that. So they're sleeping, if you see astronauts looking like this, fetal position with wraps around them, they're probably having back pain, and that's why they're sleeping like that. So there's lots of different changes taking place up there that you're adapting to. The question was, though,
why is the food on it?
so the food, another shift, I think you lose your sense of smell. And when you eat, if you plug your nose or if you have a cold, do this experiment tonight. Plug your nose and eat something and try to distinguish, say, an apple from a pear, and you're going to have a very hard time. And so that's why I don't like spicy food, but spicy shrimp cocktail in space, I love.
That's two mentions of that. Go ahead.
Hello? Okay, there we go. So when I was 6, I wanted to be an astronaut, and then my mom told me that there's the chance that you won't come back. And how did you live with that possibility looming over your head? Like, what compelled you to go up anyway?
Quick short answer. Every time I drive in Houston, I have the same feeling. So,
And I don't, Greg's not kidding. The point is, life is short. Take advantage of it. Do all you can with what you have and the time that you have, because none of us knows. I don't think I ever thought about not coming home. My first flight, 10 days later, we lost Challenger. I lost 7 dear friends, And you know, I thought about leaving the space program. I thought about it for about a nanosecond. And then I said, you know, no, I recognize the risk. I came here for a purpose, and I really want to live out their legacy, and so I flew 3 more times. And I never, ever, ever thought about it. Now, that's not to say your families don't, but because families, you know, they didn't buy into the job. And that's eventually why I left the program, was because of the stress and strain that it puts on the families they don't have an opportunity to do what you're doing and understand how much fun it is and how much you feel like you're contributing. But I would not go through my life worrying about, you know, am I going to come back, or is today going to be a bad day? There's too much good stuff going on. This is a message for all of you. Life is awesome. I don't care what anybody tells you. When you think you're having a bad day, like I used to tell my son when he was struggling to get through the Naval Academy, when you think you're having a bad day, find a friend who is having a worse day. Trust me, in this school and the schools you go to, there is somebody always who's having a little bit worse day than you are. Find them and help them get through that day, and you'd be surprised what it does for you personally. Life is good.
A couple of things that yeah, absolutely. Reflecting on what Charlie said, you know, before you launch in the shuttle, you're lying on your back and you got 2 hours to sort of think about things. And during that time, yeah, you're thinking about what you're going to be doing and everything else, but they're doing checks, verifications of the engines, everything else. You have some time to sort of reflect. And during that time, I would say, Jerry, you know, I'd be thinking about my family. You know, hope my wife's okay, hope my son's okay. I think about my United States Navy and Marine Corps, and I'd say I want to represent them well. No. What a privilege to be up here representing the greatest fighting force on the face of the earth. And then I'd also think about everybody sitting here in this audience, and I mean everyone. I told myself, Jerry, you are representing mankind, and you're going to represent them well. And every astronaut I know, when you march out to that launch pad, you just feel pure privilege and honor to be representing mankind and moving us forward. And as Charlie mentioned, you got, you know, 40,000 people, and you're the top of that pyramid, and it is a privilege to represent them all. And so I'd always say, this is worth my life. And so any fear would just get tucked away, because when it's worth you make that determination, and it really doesn't take any courage when you've made that determination. At that point, you're just going out there proud to represent our country, proud to represent mankind. Another thing I'll say, what Charlie mentioned, you know, when I landed in the space shuttle after 5 months and a lot of tough times up on the Russian space station, and that side hatch opened and the fresh air came gushing in, you know, and I'm on U.S. soil, and I say, you know, the air just tastes good. I don't have to measure the oxygen content. I don't have to worry about it rushing out, rapid decompression, suffocating me. You know, it just tastes good. And so what I urge you all, if you're having that bad day that Charlie's talking about, you don't even have to find someone that has a worse day. Just go, you know, what a carefree life, what a great existence we have here on the planet. You know, you should be smiling every second of your life. What a privilege to live down here on the planet.
The best space station in the universe is the one you're sitting in right now.
Yes.
Space Station Earth.
Hi, my name is Dylan. I go to the Manufacturing Technology Academy. And my question is about, how do private space companies change the game for both science and eventually travel?
Tell them why you're the expert, or why I
How
told
do
you.
private
I
space
wouldn't claim to be
companies
the
change the
expert,
game?
but I did spend about 5 years, a year ago and back, managing what was called the International Space Station National Laboratory. And so actually Charlie and I were working pretty close together for those 4.5 to 5 years. And the idea was to take that space station and take a part of it and commercialize it. Because the space station is an expensive endeavor. I mean, it's almost $3 billion a year to operate the thing. And we invested, what, 100 million, Charlie? Billion, roughly, in the space station? So we want to put it to best use and making an orderly transition to the commercial world, so that then they could have a larger portion, or eventually all of it, and then we could use government money to go further out into the solar system. And so it was very interesting, as we were bringing on these new commercial partners. But we knew we were making headway. A couple of years ago, we had Target came with a big sponsored program, Michael J. Fox Foundation, Eli Lilly had 4 experiments on the space station, Merck. So we had these commercial companies that were actually finding value in studying their processes and problems in space. So right now, the space station, I don't know what the percentage is of commercial work, but there's probably a dozen commercial people on the space station, and other commercial companies like SpaceX, Boeing, Orbital ATK, which is now Northrop Grumman, who are building private spaceships to go to the space station and beyond. So, so the shorter answer is, and I'm sorry I kind of extended this answer, but the commercial world is very much getting involved in it. The healthy competition between companies, where SpaceX has a different approach than Boeing, and so it's a tension where you get to the best ideas. Design thinking, it's really cool.
All right, Charlie has found somebody in particular,
she's had
and
her
I'm not
hand
sure
up
who it is. So
She's
who
had her
is it?
hand up forever. So
All right,
that's
who is
the
it?
young lady standing up over there on the outside.
Standing up here?
Yeah.
Oh, gee.
She's been very patient.
How about you guys pass it?
Hi, my name is Lillianne Miller from Crawford School, and my question is, what is it like being able to see all the planets and the stars up close in space?
A common misconception is that we do that, and you don't. We're only 250 miles. My flight with the Hubble Space Telescope, we were actually 400 miles above Earth, which is a long way, but it is nowhere compared to the distance to the stars, the moon. The moon's 250,000 miles away. That's a long way. So what you see is you see things much more crisply. The stars aren't twinkling because you're not looking through the atmosphere, but they're still nice, small, beautiful pinpoints of light, much brighter and much more stable, but they're still tiny. So unfortunately, we haven't been able, some of you, like in the Manufacturing Academy, we need people to make game-changing propulsion that'll get us to the stars, actually. The closest star is a long, long, long way away, and we're probably not going to get there in any of our lifetimes, but it's a dream anyway.
The only thing I'd say along those lines is they say you see about 4 times the number of stars you'd see from the best vantage point on Earth. And so when I'm looking out, sometimes I say, actually I had this realization of how absurd it is for us to try to classify all this. That's Cassiopeia, that's this. I just let my mind go blank and just look at it, at the gestalt of it, and it's unbelievable. And then if you got binoculars out and look between 2 points of light, you'd see 25 other objects, and you think, oh my God, this universe is beyond human comprehension.
And this is from someone who made 2,000 trips around the planet, 50 million miles, the equivalent of 110 round trips to the moon.
So I'm a little worn out from all that travel. That's why I look like I look.
Hi, I'm Olivia Rockwood from the Manufacturing Technology Academy, and I was wondering how from going to gravity to zero affected your internal organs, like your circulation, digestive system, because that's quite a change.
So Olivia, I guess it's my turn to talk. Good to see you again, Olivia, by the way. As Jerry and Charlie had said, our bodies are very adaptable, but it does take a little bit of time. And so on our 2 shuttle flights on Endeavour, we had a total of 13 crew members on those 2 flights. Nobody ever got sick, but a lot of people do get sick. And the problem is, as you know, here on the Earth, if a person next to you gets sick, then it sometimes can be a concatenation of events, and everybody's getting sick. And so we do have barf bags, emesis bags up on the space station just for that reason. As far as other effects on our bodies, as Jerry said, it takes a while to maybe not be dizzy, but you get used to it, and I'm really, you did 100 somersaults. That is, couple hundred somersaults. Now that's awesome. So it's hard to do so many somersaults and not float and hit the side. So he must have been guiding you to do all those somersaults.
Along those lines, let me just say this: when the shuttle came up, these are experienced astronauts. The best I can describe it is kind of a herd of buffalo.
Oh,
At
man.
the space station. So my crewmates and I are up there for 4 or 5 months together. For example, when we're flying by each other, we would just kind of do this and not even think about it. I just kind of go like this, he'd go like that, we'd miss each other. When the other guys came up, they're kind of doing this. Okay, I'm going over here. And knocking things off the wall. And again, experienced people, the one thing I'll never forget, you learn to make your volume smaller. So I'm eating, and I made my volume smaller like this, and I kind of tucked myself away so I'd get out of everybody's way because they had work to do. I'm in the space shuttle at this point, and I had an astronaut come by saying, "Excuse me, Jerry, I need to do an experiment there." And I actually laughed for a second because I'm thinking I just positioned myself to get out of his way. But then I realized, Charlie, he did not want to go upside down and do the experiment. Where again, at that point, and I saw the transition about 30 days into the mission where I felt like I lived there all my life. So I think at 30 days is sort of the magic, saw it in my crewmates, and he did not want to go upside down, where to me, again, I was three-dimensional, and I realized he's still two-dimensional. So that's a cognitive adaptation that you make also up there. Internal organs, everything works pretty good. Fluid shift's the big thing. Carotid artery sensors say, hey, I'm overhydrated, and they start dumping fluid. And so when you re-enter, we're doing salt loading, we're doing fluid loading, because for Earth standards, you're relatively dehydrated the whole time.
Eyes, too. The eyes change. And bull in a china shop is what our station crew told us that we were.
Yeah.
My name is Elliot, and I'm wondering if the water on Earth looks different in some spots.
What you see from space is amazing. And this is an opinion of one. You learn that we live on a water planet. As you probably know from school, 75% water. And I learned that that's one ocean. That's not. We give different sections of the ocean names, but it's one ocean, one atmosphere. As you look across, Earth's just the limb of the Earth, you can see this really thin blue line that every once in a while it's not blue, it's kind of gray brown, and you recognize pretty quickly that whatever happens in that part of the world eventually is going to affect all the way around the planet. You can tell shallows from deep water. Deep water is dark blue. The shallows are parts of the world that are just breathtakingly beautiful because it's shallow enough that you can actually see the ocean floor, very light greens and stuff like that. Not just the oceans, but the deserts of the world have unique colors. The Sahara Desert is beautiful blonde. The middle of Australia is the brightest red sand you've ever seen. So you get to the point after a few days that as you go across these places, you can tell where you are just because the way something looks without pulling out a map or something like that. So.
One thing I'd say along freshwater, Lake Baikal, incredible. Lake Michigan, the Great Lakes, they are truly great. And when I'm up in space looking down, I'm saying, I got a lot of radiation, I'm probably going to retire, where am I going to live? And I'll tell you, old Michigan looks pretty darn good down there, and those Great Lakes truly are the greatest freshwater collection of, lakes on the planet, and they stand out. And my Russian crewmates didn't know much English, but when they'd fly by and they'd look out, you'd see Michigan because of those Great Lakes, and they'd go, Jerry, Michigan, and I'd float over and take a photo of it. So it is a unique spot on Earth, and we're living here, and we are very blessed to be living here.
And I Hi, I'm Elise, and I'm from Suttons Bay Public Schools, and I'm wondering, if you're up on the moon, do you have gear to take pictures of other planets?
Yeah, you know, we've had shuttle missions, and now on the station, because we're outside the atmosphere, it's a perfect platform for astronomers and astrophysicists and folk to take pictures of other planets, of moons. Jerry mentioned getting out a set of binoculars. One of the things I used to love to do is go on the aft flight deck on the shuttle with a good set of binoculars and look at Jupiter, and you can literally see the moons of Jupiter racing around the planet. They really haul. You know, we're not accustomed to seeing our moon do like that because it takes a whole 28 days to go around. The moons of Jupiter are just moving around the planet, and that I found that absolutely phenomenal, to be able to look with a set of binoculars at another planet and its moons the way you cannot do from Earth. It takes a really good telescope.
And looking the other direction at planet Earth is fun
Yeah.
too, and it's an alive planet. And you know, the cyclones swirling and volcanoes. I saw a volcano explode and ash going, 2,000 miles in this direction. High level winds taking the steam for 3,000 miles in that direction, and the next orbit, the island is gone. So, the Earth is definitely a live, dynamic planet, and you don't capture that when you see a photo from space.
I recommend is your teacher here? Okay, I'd recommend, the class go online, look up two things. Look for National Geographic and anything about Earth and planets, and you'll see a lot of the images taken from station, shuttle, other places. But one of my favorites of our own planet that Jerry talks about is done by an astronaut by the name of Jay Apt. And Jay just put a whole photo book together of images he had taken from on board the space shuttle of our own planet home, and it's phenomenal.
And you can go to the observatory at NMC, and they have open periods of time, I think it's Friday evenings, to visit the observatory and look through the telescopes. And it always got to be a clear night, we know that, but get a chance to actually see the planets up close.
Hi, I'm Wyatt, and I was just asking, like, when you were growing up, or when you were younger, what were the astronauts that inspired you, that you looked up to when you were younger?
I can take that.
Yeah.
So I was here in Michigan at my grandparents' house on July 20th, 1969. And that is the date that Neil Armstrong stepped on the moon. My dad woke us up, the kids. We were at our grandparents' house watching a black and white TV. And that was the big inspiration for me right there when I was 7. I never thought it would happen. But, it was sort of like a dream. And that maybe would be a message to all of you. If you have a seed of interest in something that seems impossible, if you tell yourself it can't happen, then it absolutely will not happen. But if you just keep the dream alive and you keep doing things that you love, eventually it can lead toward that dream. And I'll also share, Charlie kind of hates it when I say this, but the collisions in life that lead us to the paths that we end up.
I don't hate it.
Charlie, I ran into him when he was a pilot of the shuttle, and he was going around the country talking about the space program. And I just took the day off as a fighter pilot, and because I always was interested in the space program, and I ran into Charlie and then the NASA administrator, Dan Golden, and they described the space station passing by one boat, or the Space Act passing by one boat. And Charlie said to me, go to test pilot school and do very well. And had we not had that conversation, I wouldn't be here talking about going into space. So these people, you run into them, these collisions, you got to listen, you got to let yourself be inspired.
We've got about 19 questions.
Well, I think we're down. John, are the TCC students leaving soon? Okay, all right. Then we're going to take one more question, and then we do have one short video that we want you to see before you go, and thank you.
It always happens. The kids have a feel that, okay, we're running out of time, and all of a sudden.
Last question.
Hi, I'm Isabel. I go to Central, and I was wondering if you have any advice for young people who want to be astronauts.
Ta-da!
Work really hard, volunteer.
And just do something you love. You know, whatever inspires you, it's not work when you love what you're doing. So in my case, it was medicine, and it ends up being flight surgeon, and you never know. I always wanted to be an astronaut like Greg, but, you know, do something you love. Don't do something to get something.
Exactly.
Sort of guided, but make sure you love what you're doing along the way. And Charlie's got
my final piece of advice is don't ever be afraid of failure. Be risk takers. Unlike Greg and Jerry, I never dreamed of being an astronaut. I grew up in Columbia, South Carolina, in the segregated South, and that just wasn't going to happen. I didn't know of any black astronauts. The good thing for me was there was a young man who was a little bit younger than I was by the name of Dr. Ron. I call him the late, great Dr. Ron McNair. And Ron grew up wanting to be an astronaut. That's all he wanted to do. And he taught himself calculus and physics because it wasn't offered in his high school, went to North Carolina A&T, a historically black college, and then got an opportunity to go to MIT, which he did not want to do because he didn't think he could succeed there. But a professor talked him into coming. He got a PhD in laser physics, became one of the world's foremost laser physicists, was a fifth-degree black belt in karate, an accomplished jazz saxophonist, could have done anything he wanted to do. And I met him when I was a test pilot. And he asked me if I was going to apply for the space program. I said, not on your life. And he looked shocked. He said, why not? I said, they never picked me. And he said, you know, that is the dumbest thing I ever heard anybody say. He said, how do you know if you don't apply? And so what happened was he made me feel about that big because my mom and dad were teachers. They had told me all my life that I could do anything I wanted to do if I was willing to work hard and study hard and not, you know, be a risk taker. And I didn't believe it. And so I took myself out of the game. So my advice to you is do not be afraid of failure. If you're short, don't worry about it. I was short. I weighed 84 pounds, and I was 4 feet 11 when I got to 9th grade. So I wasn't much bigger than some of the elementary school kids going into 9th grade, and I wanted to be a football player. And I played football for my dad because he had a saying, it's not the size of the dog in the fight, but the size of the fight in the dog. And so you've got to believe in yourselves. Jerry said it, you know, we've all said the same thing. You chart your future, and you determine what it is you want to be. If you study hard and you work hard, you can change your mind later on. And that's what I was able to do because I was a pretty good student, and I was able to decide very late in life that I was going to apply for the space program, and I ended up being lucky enough to get in.
All right.
What, you going to do this one?
We're going to have a video, a 1-minute video on women in the space program.
This last video is something that we just came out of Women's History Month, and I was in Delhi, India, when I showed this at a university of college, 3 colleges for women in Delhi, India, and this is called Women at NASA. Young ladies, you can do anything that you want to do. There is no limitation. There is no such thing as a man's thing anymore.
It's a good idea to do this.
Still living. She's 100 years old. She's on station right now.
Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking Charlie Bolden, Jerry Linenger, and Greg Johnson. Thank you very much.
Thank you guys.